It may be true that without a PowerPoint one is naked, but I am old school, and so I stand before you naked without a PowerPoint. It's really great to be here. I'm so just amazed and delighted to see such a large number of people turning out for an evening of reviewing this Taiwan election. It's been a really fascinating one, as always. Joe says he leaves Taiwan feeling a little, oh, are they going to be okay? You know, it's a little like walking off campus after you drop your child off at college or something. I keep leaving Taiwan elections thinking, all right, once again, it was more exciting and interesting and surprising than it was supposed to be. You know, I keep imagining, I think you're right, Joe, that Taiwan is a normal democracy, but yet I keep thinking it will become routine. And maybe democracy is not routine. Living in the United States in 2016, I should definitely know there's nothing routine about democracy. Nonetheless, I keep imagining that Taiwan's might get a little less exciting, but I am still waiting because this election, again, was full of surprises. And so what I want to do just a little bit tonight to get things started is to talk about the parties. Joe has laid out the basic electoral results, and Alexander has given us a great overview of the issues. But I think one of the issues that, or the topics that a lot of people are wondering about is the big swing, the really dramatic swing in the outcome from a period in which the KMT and the affiliated parties with it, so the blue side, had been really pretty dominant and quite strong in terms of electoral support and also its position in government, to this absolutely dramatic swing to the DPP and its allies, the Green parties, now being in a position to form a government with a strong legislative majority and control over the executive. So what's going on in the parties, I guess, is the answer. What is the new normal, and where may this all be leading? The KMT was in power in Taiwan from 1945 until 2000. But one might argue until now, because the DPP, no other political party ever commanded a majority in the legislature. So the KMT lost the presidency from 2000 to 2008, but it retained control over the legislature. And I think it's worth digging in a little bit to understand why the KMT had this long reign of success. Obviously, from 1945 until sometime in the 1980s, we can argue ad infinitum about when Taiwan became a democracy. That's boring political science. But we know that Taiwan's democratization occurred over the course of sometime in the 1970s and was definitely all the way there by 1996, when it had its first direct presidential election. So for a long time, the KMT was in power because it was an authoritarian state with a single-party government, and the KMT was the single party. But what's interesting about the KMT is even after democratization, so even after it had to compete for power, it continued to win. And I think it continued to win for many reasons, but I'm just going to mention two. One is the party's broad economic appeal. The KMT has never been a party of any particular socioeconomic class. It has had something for everyone on the economic policy front. And in fact, whenever the DPP came up with a really good idea, like, let's have national health insurance, that's something I know something about, the KMT said, yeah, excellent plan. We'll take over. So they were not a kind of ideological party in the sense that they couldn't absorb good ideas from outside, and so they were able to provide something for everybody for a long time. The other thing that I think helped the KMT be successful for so many decades, even after democratization, was that it had very deep electoral roots. It might have been ruling Taiwan as a single party for a long time, but even during that authoritarian era, Taiwan had local elections. So if you wanted to be a big man in a Taiwanese community, one of the things you could do was run for office. And as long as you were willing to put that KMT pin through your jacket, you could become a politician, and you could rise actually very high. So you had this deep, embedded political, grassroots political organization loyal to the KMT, so that when the DPP came along and said, all right, now we're going to have partisan competition, the KMT was already really well entrenched. So the mystery is, right, how did that all fall apart in 2016? First of all, I think one thing that happened is that the KMT was always kind of in two parts. One part was this grassroots electoral party of ordinary Taiwanese people who said, I want to be a xiangzhang, I want to be the township head. So I'm going to join the KMT and work my way up and be a xiangzhang. But then there was also the top senior inner circle leaders who were mostly people who either themselves or later on they were the descendants of people who came to Taiwan from the mainland with Chiang Kai-shek in the 1940s. And so they had a much different outlook and a much different set of priorities. But they were willing to collaborate with the grassroots electoral party because that's what allowed the KMT to continue to govern Taiwan even after it accepted the necessity for democratization. And accepted that necessity, I hasten to add, lest I be rightly criticized from the floor, accepted that necessity under great pressure, right, from Taiwan's society and from the opposition movement. So you have these two wings of the KMT working together. That collaboration began to fall apart, especially after 2000. In 2000, the KMT lost the presidential election, and two very important people quit the KMT. Li Denghui, who was the most important link between the grassroots electoral party and the inner circle top leadership, and also James Song Chu-yu, who was a presidential candidate again this year, but who had also forged good relations with the grassroots electoral party. For reasons that we don't need to go into here, both of those figures left the KMT after 2000, and they broke the link between the leadership and the grassroots electoral part of the KMT. And Alex, you know a lot more about the KMT than I ever will, so you can pick this theory apart later if you feel so inclined. At first it didn't matter. Between 2000 and 2008 it didn't matter because the party was unified by two other forces. The desire to get back into power, so everyone in the KMT, no matter which part of the party they were from, lined up behind Ma Ying-jeou because they wanted the KMT to win as soon as possible. And they were unified by their determination to block Chen Shui-bian from accomplishing his objectives. So in the legislature worked together with the party center to prevent Chen Shui-bian from changing things in ways that the KMT would rather he would not. But then in 2008, the KMT returned to power, and this crisis broke into the open, where the central leadership, with Ma Ying-jeou at the head, so the president, on the one hand, +moving in one direction, which was guided largely by their conviction that Taiwan's future lay in 1 + 1 = right? That vague, what does 1 + 1 equal? Well, we can fuzz that up enough to keep going and to gain the economic and other advantages of a better relationship with the mainland, and just not really worry too much about the pressure from within Taiwan society for a clearer answer. So on the one hand, you have, the senior leadership in the executive, mainly headquartered in the executive branch and in the party headquarters, taking a more sort of Sino-philic, or at least open to China view. At the same time, in the legislature, you have a lot of KMT politicians who were not crazy about the direction that the top leadership was going, and perhaps more importantly, were not crazy about the personnel in party headquarters. And so what you see, and Alexander also mentioned this, was that the KMT, despite having a huge majority in the legislature, did not pass most of President Ma's key legislative priorities. So you see the KMT kind of breaking apart between the leadership and the grassroots party. And I think, and ultimately that sort of tore open in this catastrophic confrontation between President Ma and the Speaker of the legislature, the KMT legislator Wang Jinping. Ma Ying-jeou tried to remove Wang Jinping from the legislature by firing him, by kicking him out of the KMT party. It was just a total disaster, and actually Wang Jinping won this confrontation. He remained in the legislature, he didn't get kicked out of the KMT, and he ended up saving the country's bacon by negotiating the peaceful and successful resolution of the sunflower activists' occupation of the legislative chamber. So you come into the 2016 election season, in other words, with the KMT in a really serious internal crisis. So maybe there's not so much actually that we need to explain about this electoral outcome given the deep problems in the KMT. Nonetheless, I'll say a little something about the DPP. I think that the period of 2000 to 2008, when they controlled the presidency but not the legislature, was a period of intense frustration and learning for the DPP, that they could not accomplish. They'd made very little progress on the issues that were really important to the party. And they were not becoming more electable as a result of their experience in government. And that and the 2012 election, when Tsai Ing-wen, the same candidate who's just been elected with this very healthy margin, was not elected, right, failed in her first bid, the 2012 disappointment reinforced the message that somehow the DPP needed to adjust itself, adjust its own positions and its own orientation toward politics and governing to a more moderate position. One also more focused on pragmatic, domestic, economic issues and less vulnerable to the critique from the KMT that the DPP is just reckless and dangerous because all they want to do is, drag Taiwan toward independence, which we know that's 1 + 1 = 2, and that means war, right? So in 2016, you see the DPP taking a more moderate approach, emphasizing the status quo, emphasizing nothing changes in cross-strait relations, we just take it a little slower, we're a little bit more cautious, and emphasizing domestic issues. Meanwhile, at the same time, the DPP is maybe moving, if right-left doesn't really make sense, but somehow it feels like it's a move to the right, to more moderation. The electorate's moving in the other direction toward the DPP. So that even the DPP's doesn't have to move as far in 2016 as it would have had to move in 2012 in order to meet the median voter, more political science jargon, right, where she sits. So the combination of the DPP's adjustment, the electorate's changing preferences, and the KMT's disarray, I think, is kind of more than enough to explain the outcome we saw. One tiny observation, though. As bad as this outcome looks for the KMT, it's no worse than the outcome for the DPP in 2008. Mai Ying-jeou actually got a higher percentage of the vote in 2008 than Tsai Ing-wen got in 2016. And the KMT had a larger share of the legislature, I think, after the 2008 election than the DPP has now. So it's a huge swing, but we've been that far in the other direction. Now we're over here. I think it's going to be another really exciting election in 4 years, and Joe, I'll see you there.